2015 when we were involved in a panel about the Charlie Hebdo attacks. And the theory was, or the question presented was, can one laugh at anything? And as we learned at the University of Minnesota, you really can't. We got in a lot of trouble for that particular panel, but that is another story. In any event, Steve Sack, Pulitzer Prize winner, editorial cartoonist at the Star Tribune, will introduce our keynote speaker, Jack Ullman.
Thank you. Greetings, cartoonists, academics, lawyers, humans, and those three guys watching C-SPAN right now. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Jack Ullman. Jack started his career on this very campus at the student paper, the Minnesota Daily, my old job. He began his professional career at the Columbus Dispatch, followed by a stint at the Detroit Free Press, followed by a stint at the Portland Oregonian, followed by a stint at the Sacramento Bee, and that's as far as his Wikipedia goes. Jack's awards and accolades are numerous, and he's won virtually every cartooning award in the book, including being awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 2016. Even more impressive than the Pulitzer was his achievement in 2017, when Jack wrote one of the forwards to my new book, The First and Only Book of Sack, available at Star Tribune Online for the low, low price of $15, plus shipping. Could C-SPAN zoom in on this, please? Thank you. They left? Yeah. Darn. The only other thing you need to know about Jack is he does a killer John F. Kennedy impression. And it's my understanding that he's going to give his entire speech in character. So I'm happy to introduce Jack Fitzgerald Ullman.
Thank you very much, Steve. Great to be here. No, I'm not going to do that. It is a true honor for me to speak here at my alma mater today, where I racked up a grand total of 38 transferable credits over 2.5 years. My father, in comparison, graduated from the University of Minnesota with a PhD in plant pathology in 1961, and he never let me forget it, ever. First, I would like to greet my esteemed editorial cartooning colleagues here today. We have the ageless, effervescent, and pioneering Mike Peters, the towering genius and my great friend Ben Sargent, the animated and innovative Ann Telness, the mighty Matt Worker, the indefatigable and meticulous Mike Thompson, the very Norwegian Signe Wilkinson, the president of the California Editorial Cartoonists Association and multi-talented Steve Breen, the bilingual and blue-eyed bomb-throwing Joel Pett, the bombastic and brilliant Pat Bagley, my LDS blood brother from many different mothers, my great-great-grandfather had 4 wives and 38 children. It's kind of a funny story. I got a periodically, I will get emails from people rightly telling me that they're my third cousin. And so one of my third cousins wrote a book about our great-great-grandfather, Joseph Smith Black. And so I thought it would be funny to post a photograph of my great-great-grandfather in Sugarland prison where they put all the polygamists. And so 90 seconds after I posted the photograph, Pat Bagley said under it, "My great-great-grandfather is on the far right." And he was. I'm also very glad to see again the iconic and talented Kirk Anderson. I want to give a shout out to Kevin Sayers, who is my successor at the Minnesota Daily, who won the 2014 Pulitzer Prize, who's probably actually graduated from here if I'm not mistaken. Steve Artley is here, great Minnesotan and friend. The erudite Cullum Rogers is here. The libertarian Chip Bach is here, my good friend Chip, and the brutally gifted Steve Sack, my beloved predecessor at the Minnesota Daily. Now, how does a person wind up as a cartoonist? Are we journalists? What are we? You know, what's the career path? Somebody once asked, well, Rube Goldberg won the Pulitzer in about 1948, and Rube Goldberg was rather defensive about his status. And so he went to his editor, and he said, "Is a cartoonist a journalist?" And the editor said, "Is a barnacle a ship?" So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and then I will talk more on the point of satire and political cartooning. Now, when I was 7, my family was living in Marquette, Michigan, up in the UP in March of 1968. My dad was a research scientist, and he came home and told us that we were moving to Washington, D.C. Now, I can see some people in the audience would recall what the world was like in March 1968. Marquette is a rather isolated place, a college town of 17,000 people at the time, sitting on the shores of Lake Superior. It's really more culturally akin to Canada than it is to the United States. Days after we arrived in Washington, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. My father took me over to Arlington, where we watched our nation's capital burning. Dozens of spires of smoke wafted up from the city skyline. A few months after that, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated. A few days later, I found myself walking with thousands of others into Arlington Cemetery in the twilight to see the burial of Robert F. Kennedy. I still vividly remember standing on a narrow road at Arlington and seeing President Johnson first drive slowly by. My mother said, "My God, that's President Johnson." And there was a black woman sitting on a cooler, and she said, "I don't give a damn about him, I just want to see Bobby." Then the hearse-bearing Senator Kennedy's body went by, and the bright colors of the U.S. flag made such a visual impression on me that I still remember seeing it 50 years later, along with Ethel Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy. We were very close to the gravesite, which was hyper-illuminated with television lights. These two early childhood memories led me to an interest in reading the newspaper, which I strongly encourage, and also in following politics. Not long after that, in 1972, I had moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, where I actually was born in Charles Miller Hospital, which is now the site of the Minnesota Historical Society. And yes, I have toned down my accent, which used to be something like this. "Oh yeah, we're going crappie and walleye fishing today, and we're using chartreuse jigs with mealworms because they were out of leeches and minnows at the bait shop." Story about my Minnesota accent. I went to my 20th high school reunion in 1998, which actually was where we are staying for this conference. This guy who I knew sat next to me at graduation, Doug O'Leeson. Parenthetically, everybody in Minnesota is named Doug O'Leeson. Ron Johnson, Dave Anderson, Mark Peterson, or even Mike Thompson. There are women named Signe here. There are women named Telness, but not Steve Sack. No Minnesotans other than Steve Sack is named Steve Sack. So Doug came up to me and said, "Jack Ullman, how are you? Good to see you." "Doug, it's good to see you. How are you?" Doug says, "So, you're a political cartoonist out there in Oregon." "Yep, it's great. I really like Oregon. You don't have to shovel the rain out of your driveway." Doug then says, "Geez, what happened to your accent? You sound like you're from California." Anybody here from Minnesota? How can anybody not be from? This is the University of Minnesota. My early interest in politics led me to closely following Watergate instead of the Minnesota Twins and the Minnesota Vikings, whose sole goal and continues to be to shatter my childhood hopes on a regular basis. Of course, my Watergate fascination made me a babe magnet. I could name the members of the Senate Watergate Committee instead of the starting Twins lineup. In 1992, I was invited to give a speech in Coeur d'Alene. It was to a conference of Western state legislators. While there, Someone asked me what my childhood interests were, and I enthusiastically and eloquently described my love of Watergate. After my speech, a woman of about 60 years old approached me and said, "Mr. Ullman, I really enjoyed your speech. I was particularly interested in your remarks about Watergate." "Oh, yes," I replied, "I loved Watergate. Watergate was my life. Watergate was fantastic. I loved every minute of Watergate." The woman replied, "I had a personal experience with Watergate you might be interested in." "Oh, what was that?" She said, "I was Mrs. John Ehrlichman." I don't do that anymore. This interest in Watergate led me to seeing and following political cartoons by noted artists such as Herb Bloch, Oliphant, Malden, Conrad, McNally, David Levine, and Jules Feiffer, and many others, who helped define cartoon satire in America. I started at the Minnesota Daily in 1978, having recently completed my political career as a driver for a DFL congressional candidate. I was also an advance man for Vice President Mondale whenever he would come to town, and met him several times. I'm sure he doesn't remember it, but I do remember doing things like putting tape on the floor and it said, you know, Eleanor Mondale or Joan Mondale. That was some of my major political responsibilities. My goal was either to become governor of Minnesota or a U.S. senator from Minnesota, and little did I realize how easy that would be to do. My best friend's mother was the dean of the General College at the U. She saw an ad for an opening for a political cartoonist at the Minnesota Daily. Now, interestingly, Steve, I was well aware of you in high school because we would see the dailies that Mrs. Hansen would bring home, and so my friend Keith Hansen and I would, we were very much fans of yours, and I can remember really seeing dozens and dozens of these things and marveling at them as a 15, 16-year-old kid. And you know, never in a million years did I think that we would be in this position today. And so this ad, and I didn't have any real path to the governorship at that time, nor any job whatsoever. I decided to apply. So I went in for my interview at the Daily, and I was up against 39 art majors. Apparently, so I was told, the trick question was this: who is William F. Buckley? I am not kidding. That was the question they asked every candidate. Not only did I know who William F. Buckley was, I watched Firing Line most weeks, had read some of his books, and did a killer William F. Buckley impression. So what particularly are you looking for in a political cartoonist? I believe myself to be sui generis. So I got the job. C-SPAN would have just eaten that up, you know what I mean? It's like the demo, you know. In 1978, Jimmy Carter was president, and we did not have the following: the internet, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Facebook, personal computers, Twitter, cell phones, or truly reliable snowblowers. Today we have all these and more. I had no plans to become a political cartoonist in 1978, and I should have known that I was destined for the ironic life when I realized this. I was born in the presidential election year of 1960. My parents, and I am not making this up, were actually named John and Jackie. They named me Jack, and they voted for Nixon. Now, if you want me to answer questions as Nixon later, I am more than happy to do so. I went to Mounds View High School, where I plotted my political career. In an early foreshadowing of my career, I fought hard against our incumbent student government president. This is Minnesota. I was so good. I had the hair. I had the ties. I had the rhetoric. I was going to be a governor. Do you know what that student government president I went after so very mercilessly does right now for a living? She's the current governor of Oregon. Kate Brown, Google it. I was so effective. Now in my ear there, people smoked at the Daily all the time at their desks, of all things and all kinds. People went out for beers at lunch and stayed out all night at the late lamented Jimmy Hagg's bar. The Daily was a very, very well-funded operation. I was paid enough to draw cartoons for a living, and this relieved me of having to find a real job. My biggest problem working for the Daily was getting to class, a rare occurrence. Fighting blizzards, wearing U.S. Air Force parkas, and living without oxygen or moving water for 6 months a year were my real problems. The Daily taught me many things. I learned how to work on deadline, work with editors, and survive many crossings of the dreaded Washington Avenue Bridge, which was more of a wind tunnel than an actual bridge. My predecessors on the Daily in the 1970s were the legendary Pete Wagner and the also legendary Steve Sack, and following them made me have some empathy for the Prime Minister after Winston Churchill or the first baseman after Rod Carew. In fact, it was a moment with Pete Wagner. I doubt, is he here? I haven't seen him. Okay, well, Pete Wagner, as brutal as Pete Wagner was at the time, we went on a radio show on, is it KUOM, the student station here? And it was in Rarig, I guess. And I was probably still 18. And Pete Wagner, he held up a cartoon that I had done, and he spent about 20 minutes blasting me and my work and what was I doing here, and you're not doing anything or saying anything, and it was, I actually started to cry, and they stopped the interview. And I walked out, and he came up afterwards, and he was like, not exactly apologetic, but his point was, okay, you've got a platform, you've got the responsibility, you've got to say things. And as brutal as that was, and you know, Pete and I are fine now, but like as brutal as that was, it really helped me. It was like, oh, I'm not just trying to draw like Jeff McNelly. Oh, I'm not just trying to draw like Pat Oliphant. No, I'm not just trying to, you know, do Steve Sack. I have to find my own voice and say my own thing. So it was enormously professionally useful. So I started on the Minnesota Daily in 1978 before I had racked up a single college credit. My first day on the Daily, they were filming a movie at the U, and it was on the Mall, and it was starring Gary Busey. And I remember Gary Busey walking slowly towards me as a camera dolly was following him, and it was almost like in slow motion. I mean, it could have been the Buddy Holly story, I don't know. But I mean, it was just, it was a really, and I don't do Buddy Holly. But it was it was like this flash bulb moment that we have. It's like, why is my college life starting off with the very strange Gary Busey walking towards me in slow motion? I still have that dream. So my first cartoon was about Richard Nixon saying he was a political prisoner, which was a huge issue at the time. And I drew it with a leaky flare pen. Another was about class size and freshman composition, an evergreen subject at the university. Other than my William F. Buckley impression, I felt like I was frequently at sea. I needed a mentor. Now, Steve Sack had just gone to the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, and I believe I had written him a letter. He responded with a poster board-sized response that must have had 10 drawings on it and 2,000 words of advice. And he did this not only once, but several times, and at that scale, or 10-page letters, single space on a legal pad. And I still have these letters. And I am still grateful to him, and so in your debt at this moment. And I know that he has done this for lots of other young cartoonists. And so here I am, 57 years old, and here he is 53 years old. And you know, that this is who Steve is. This is what being a nice Minnesotan is all about. And we speak to this day. And frankly, he still writes me once in a while and says, "Great cartoon today." And this still moves me enormously and makes my day every time. I promise this is the last time I will bring this up, but I have personally said this to him many times. Now, once at the Daily for about a year, I decided to start sending my cartoons to Time and Newsweek. Newsweek published the first cartoon I had ever sent them. And it astonished me to open up the magazine and see my name. From there, I started sending my cartoons to the Washington Post, and Meg Greenfield took some interest in my career, and they started running my cartoons. And I am very sad to say that I have never met her or even spoken to her. In early 1980, I got a phone call from a man named Ralph Husner. Ralph worked at the University of Minnesota Hospital in communications. He was a former Chicago Tribune syndicate salesman, and he sent my stuff to the Chicago Tribune, and they syndicated me, if you can believe this, at the age of 19. If you have any 19-year-olds in your life, I mean, you know, you can see how, like, they can't even, you know, clean their room. They can't do anything. But so I was completely in shock, and so I went out to New York for my interview. I bought a new tie and new shoes at Al Johnson's Haberdashery, which was in Dinkytown where I lived. And oddly, I never went to Al's breakfast either. The first thing that the syndicate salesman said, or syndicate president said to me was, "Are those new shoes?" And from those new shoes, I managed to get hired by the Columbus Dispatch, and then the Detroit Free Press, which now employs my great friend Mike Thompson, who is here today, who I first met in, 1979 or 80? I think 80. And he went to Washburn High School in Minneapolis. And so he was a senior, and I spoke to his class, and now he's there's a very strange Minnesota vortex here. But it's funny how, somebody like a Steve Sack, or me talking to Mike Thompson's class, I'm sure I wasn't the only influence that Mike Thompson had, but these little touch points can light something. And so I then moved out to the Oregonian, and I worked there for 28 years, and then I went to the Sacramento Bee, where I succeeded one of my best friends, Rex Babin, who died at age 49. And that's where I am currently drawing today. Now, I am now drawing somebody who I started drawing at age 14 in 1975, Governor Jerry Brown. I mean, this is a weird loop. And when I was here, I met Fritz Mondale and Hubert Humphrey and many other Minnesota political icons. Now, wouldn't the world be a better place if Fritz Mondale were President of the United States? Plus, he's the mascot of my favorite hockey team, the Fighting Mondales of the University of Minnesota Law School. Yes, it is a real thing. Now, I would like to address the theme of this conference briefly and discuss the importance of our shrinking but hardy craft. We are now living in the political equivalent of an alcoholic family, where the father figure, if you can call him that, is at times abusive, bizarre, unpredictable, untethered, angry, juvenile, obsessive, and needs constant affirmation. Many of us cower in fear of this loon and take on familiar dysfunctional family roles, enablers, deniers, but fortunately rebels. The cartoonists are the rebels. We are not going to sit still while others may hope that he just goes away, and he will eventually just go away. Now, last night, or 2 nights ago, in Scarlet Trump country in Twin Falls, Idaho, I was asked a very simple question, and a very poignant question. Will we survive this? My answer is an emphatic yes. We will survive this because we are not the deep state, because there isn't a deep state. They're just mostly normal Americans going about their lives, and most of these Americans crave stability. We are going to check Dad into rehab in 2021. We go on about our lives, raise our kids, love our partners, check in on Mom and Dad, go to baseball and soccer, watch the Vikings lose, work in meaningful jobs, meet our friends, have fun, ice fish, and do all sorts of mundane but necessary things to keep the wheels on while the crazy man plays us off against each other. Cartoonists are not just here to amuse, although we do. Cartoonists are not here solely to draw Trump's alleged attempted hair. We are here to go beyond illustrating Trump's Rorschach test and hold him accountable. He doesn't make that easy, for he is the first self-parodying president. Tom Lehrer, now 90 years old, said satire died when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize. That may be true to a certain extent, but we are not portraitists of the absurd. We are looking for an honest man or woman, and we have the ability to hold that lantern and shed light, not throw shade. Every single person on the podium today does that professionally. But it's not just that. We are more than gag writers at the apocalypse. We are part of the vanguard of the return of the value of truth in our democracy. Truth is all we have as a society. If we abdicate truth, where are we? If up is down, black is white, and the University of Minnesota is described as the University of Wisconsin, we need, in the words of the aforementioned avowed actual conservative William F. Buckley, who detested Trump and saw him for what he is, we have to stand, quote, athwart history and cry, stop, stop, stop. Cartoonists, commentators, and professors, students, business leaders, children who are threatened with instant death or murdered in their own schools by automatic weapons, women who are discriminated against and demeaned, LGBTQ people who are marginalized, and common people with common dreams are united in this effort to cry, stop. Not everyone agrees that he needs to be stopped, although some privately know that he is a danger. Oh, he gave us the tax cut. Oh, he deregulated environmental standards, but you probably won't get cancer, at least not yet. Oh, we are just going to go along because our donors will rebel against us. Oh, we can't publicly call him crazy. Oh, but our emails. Cartoonists can, cartoonists do, and cartoonists will continue to do so until this country is freed from the slavery of the lie and the servitude of the myth. Cartoonists, along with others who comment satirically, have the power to grab the remote from dysfunctional Don, tell him he can't see the buttons anymore, and channel surf away from this grotesquerie of an unreality show. I have been drawing cartoons for 40 years. I used to pride myself not on my ability to draw cartoons when things are insane, but when they are boring. I crave boring. My ideal president would be the Maytag repairman. I would love to return to drawing cartoons about the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. I'd kill to draw a cartoon about the weather now. But these times demand that the people on the stage here today are fearless, engaged, enraged, and principled. They are all those things. And we should all be like Steve Sack, too. Brutal when truth is threatened, but nice, like Minnesotans. Make America Minnesota again. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Do we, where am I on time? Do we have time for a question or two? Two or three questions? Okay, Jane. Anybody?
Jack, I think
yes.
that pad has been standing there all day and nobody's drawn anything on it.
Oh, well, bring it on over here so again. Yeah, if you could. What's the second question? I will, yeah.
So I assume that's you, right?
Yes. That was me in 1976. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, right. Oh, was that brought over? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. How about a quick Hubert Humphrey that I can still draw from memory? Yeah. Yeah. He's that good. Well, I did grow up in Minnesota, right? I mean, this isn't. Does anyone know his name? What's he? Sits home alone and waits for the phone to ring. Once a fiery liberal spirit, now when he speaks, he must clear it. Every
Second fiddle's a hard part.
I know, when they don't even give you a foe. We must protest this treatment, Hubert, says each newspaper reader. As someone once remarked to Schubert, take us to your leader. Everything's a song to you.
Maybe, but still.
What the heck? There's Hubert. caricatures they like done. RFK, you name it. William, okay. Wow, okay. See, what do you give me if I can do a recognizable William F. Buckley? Yes, Steve.
Do you really wish things were boring now? Do you really want to draw cartoons about the Federal Reserve Board?
I was very good at that. Yeah, because I went to the Gridiron dinner a couple weeks ago. The McClatchy D.C. correspondent was president, and so they brought me out to go to this, and it's that white tie and tail things, and Trump actually came to this, and I was probably 20, 25 feet from him, and so he's there, the First Lady's there, Jared and Ivanka are there, and incidentally, Jared and Ivanka look like, they're very tall people. They look like beautiful giraffes when they're walking. Pence, Mrs. Pence, Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein, Pruitt, I mean, you name it. It was the police lineup from a year from now, you know? And you know, you can't even believe that you're like seeing these people in person. And so Trump, all I kept looking at in Trump was this. People say he doesn't laugh. He does laugh, but the only thing he laughs at are references to Hillary Clinton. And so, I mean, some people will draw Trump and they will really emphasize the hair, but I tend to do the top hair more like a pancake than a bouffant. And so, to me, Trump looked like this. This is not my normal, you know, posture when I'm drawing. This is kind of like the International Space Station version of my caricature. But I just kept looking at, like, that's how he looked to me. And he, but I just focused on like that part of his face, and like when he laughed, it would kind of move up a little bit, you know. Man, C-SPAN's really missing something, right?
Jack, would you care to explain your obsession with Federalist architecture? How does it not get old to draw the exteriors of those buildings for the 800
Well, I have a lot of friends who are architects, and I always tell them that they're cartoonists who are really good at math. Which is true. And so I felt like when I started in cartooning in 1978, there were you know, some really top-notch artists working out there. And you know, Oliphant was doing these amazing windows and capitals and domes and stuff like that, and Conrad was really good at drawing those things. And so I kind of, I was always like a natural caricaturist. I mean, I could get likenesses pretty quickly, like when I was in high school. So I thought, well, I kind of, not that you ever get it down, you don't ever get it down, but like I really hyper-focused on drawing federal buildings and, you know, iconic and Doric columns and the differences and stuff. And so it may not surprise you at all that I'm rather obsessive compulsive. I've been known to, I will type, like I will print out type, for example, for a cartoon like that has a narrative on it, and then I will trace over the type so that it's more jiggly. So I mean, this is me, right? So my obsession is in detail. And you can go too far with it, and I think one of the things I really learned in cartooning was not what to put in, but what to leave out, like consciously, where's the negative space, and I've gotten better at it. I mean, but I have to say a lot of, just a couple of points before I go, is people think that cartooning is a drawing job. It is not a drawing job, it is a writing job. A friend of mine once said that he felt that editorial cartoons were editorials in haiku form. And I think that that's really what we're doing. It's super reductionist. You're distilling phrases. It's not like, you know, you and I, back in the old days when they hired all the editorial cartoonists out of the art department in like 1940, and they were really great artists, you know, but they would start, okay, I've got a bomb, what's the label, you know? Okay, I've got a missile, what's the label? Oh, I've got a tank, what's the label? I never think like that. I'm always like, I'm just walking around all day thinking, the elephant in the room, 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 and like, how can I draw the elephant in the room with Hannity, and what do I write on the elephant, and you know, it's Cohen is my lawyer, and then the punchline is ancillary to that phrase that you're pulling out, right? And so, yes, I love drawing, and I mean, I'm never more relaxed than I am when I am cross-hatching, and you know this about me, but just, and I know that there are other cartoonists, they're more about the big picture, but I'm always like, how can I literally throw shade, you know, and how this comes out, and that gives me a hell of a lot of joy in this job, is like planning the drawing, hyper-focusing on the little lines around Trump's mouth, or making sure that the waddle is drawn exactly right, or that I'm not, you know, doing it in a way that also other people are doing it. That was the, you know, challenge when we were all starting in cartooning, because we had, you know, these brilliant, you know, three people really, Oliphant, McNally, and Conrad, and Peters as well. I mean, a lot of people drew like Peters, a lot of people drew like McNally, a lot of people drew like Conrad and Oliphant. But like, we all started off doing that, or Tony Auth, right? I mean, we all had our guy, you know. My guy was McNally, and by God, I mean, I suffered professionally, not in getting reprints, because they were more than happy to take me and 5 other guys who drew like McNally. Oh, more McNallys, that's great. But I mean, that really didn't make you very popular with your peers, number one, and it didn't make me popular with myself, because I knew that I had to break away from that. Eventually, good artists will break away from that, and all the cartoonists who I would, you know, put in that category have broken away from that, right? So everybody, writers start off, they wanted to write like Tom Wolfe, and we wanted to draw like McNally and Oliphant. And now I think we've got a wonderfully diverse set of styles in American political cartooning. I mean, and I think, you know, Tom Towles is like, I've told him many times, I think he's the greatest caricaturist in the country, and he, you know, he doesn't even know it. You know, and he can get things down to like, I mean, the way he draws Obama, like, what? It's like 8 lines, right? There's 2 circles, there's the one, and it's there, you know? And Jane, I am going to stop right now. Jane, thank you so much for telling me to stop. Thank you so much.
I couldn't bear to cut him off, but I had to. So, yeah, this is my stop sign, just so you can all see what it looks like. Okay, so we're supposed to have a 15-minute break, but guess what? You get a 5-minute break, and at 1:30 we will be back for our next panel. So if you need to scurry out, scurry out. But please be back at 1:30. And if the next panel